It is the second month of my mini quilt challenge, and I thought it would be fun to celebrate my love of quilting and sewing. So this month's free pattern is Make and Mend from Tilda's World, specifically the sewing machine block, although I might make the other block sometime later on this year. And as always, the link to this pattern is in the description of this video. At first glance, this pattern looks like a lot. It looks very complicated, but when you break it down to its basic blocks, the construction is actually pretty simple, especially if you prep your fabric with like a ton of sizing, because there are some pretty tiny pieces in here. But besides that, I find that the most difficult aspect for a pattern like this is just cutting efficiently. In an average quilt pattern, you're usually cutting a lot of the same size pieces, like, 20 5x5 squares, 60 2x4 rectangles, stuff like that. Very standard, very simple, a lot of the same thing over and over again. But if you look at this pattern, you can see there is a lot going on here. There's some really strange sizes. If you look at J right here, it is 3/4 inches by 1.5 inches. And then if you look at A, it is 10 by 4. And then this in here, that's 1.5 inch square. There's just a lot of really strange size pieces, and most of them, there's only one of them. There's only one M, one H, one G. So before I would get started on a pattern like this, I would double check the fabric requirements. I would read through all of the cutting instructions, and then I'm going to put everything into Affinity Designer and arrange it until it makes sense. I make cutting guides like these, and I find that they help me stay organized because I can cross things off as I go, and they also help me save a ton of fabric. So for instance, for the background, it calls for 1/2 yard, and I think I've got less than half. I've got like a 1/4 yard going on here. For the sewing machine parts, it asks for a fat 1/4, and you can see I'm using probably a fat 1/8. Now obviously patterns often call for extra fabric, but that seems pretty excessive to me. But it is nice to have stuff if you make a mistake, I guess. But anyway, it saves me fabric in the long run. I'm going to try to upload these cutting guides to the description of this video, but I have had problems doing that in the past. It doesn't always work, so wish me luck. It is also important to note that these cutting guides are just for the sewing machine and the background, so you still need to refer to the pattern for the thread, the needle, the circle thing, and the fabric piece. Now, if it is your first time using a cutting guide like this, I should probably explain how to use it. So first of all, this is a template for the P piece, this one here. So that's going to be applique, so you don't really need to mess with that at first. For now, I just cut out a 4-inch square for that piece. But when I'm going to start cutting my sewing machine pieces, I'm going to first look at the orientation. So if this is a fat 1/4, that means this is 18 inches and this is my 20 inches. And I like to make it 20 inches because I always want to account for some of this seam allowance. And then after it is oriented correctly, I'm going to go from the left to right. If you are left-handed, you might want to start from the right and work left. But since I'm right-handed, I would start with a 3-inch strip. So I'd probably overcut it a bit, like 3.5 inches, and then turn it around and then even up this side, because you can't always trust that that's perfectly straight. So I'd have my 3-inch strip, and then I would subcut it a 10-inch and then 2 3-inch squares. Then I would move on to the next one, and for this column I would cut it at 4.5. Then from that strip I would subcut it down to 8.5, and then I'd have this chunk again and trim off that extra 1/2 inch to get the 4 inches, and then trim it down to 8 inches long, if that makes sense, okay? And then for the last one, that's a 1.5 inch strip, and then I would subcut it. Now, when I move on to the background, I'm using yardage. So you can see I have 42 inches by 18 inches. So it's all marked up like this as if the piece is unfolded. But when I cut my strips, I'm gonna fold that yardage in half along the width of fabric and cut my strip and then unfold it when it comes time to subcut it. The selvage would be up here, my folded edge would be down here, and then the raw edge would be here. So I would overcut it to like 5.5 inches and then cut it even up this side, the raw side, to make it exactly 5 inches, and then cut my M. And then when it comes time to do these two sections here, I wouldn't cut it in half yet. I would cut it right here and then split these in half. And then because these pieces here got really small, I use a bigger font over here just to make sure that I don't make any mistakes and read things wrong. So I hope that made sense, because these are so useful and I really like to make them for patterns that start out looking like this. And one last tip for when you are cutting, you definitely want to label as you go, because you'll get pieces like this, 1.5 by 5 inches, 1.5 by 5.5 inches. So pretty close, and it's easy to mix those up when you're just looking at them. You want to definitely clearly mark Q and H. And you might have similar problems with the R and the C. So definitely label while you go to eliminate some of these little mistakes that might pop up. Okay, so this is a pretty good example of why I overcut that first strip. So I need a 3-inch wide strip, and I have lined up along this seam, and I've got about 3 3/4, and going straight up. You can see if you look here, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then up here, I also have a straightish edge. So this is definitely the problem right here. So I would overcut here, and then I would flip this strip around and then even up that side. So first up, I'm going to do all of my stitch and flip corners all at once. And the benefit of that is I can chain piece everything, and also I can deal with all of these little tiny pieces before I have a chance to lose them. So for my B pieces, I'm going to use the C. For my M, I have 2 N's. For my Q, I have 2 R's. And then for an O, I have an N. And for the V, I have another N. I've gone ahead and drawn lines on the back of all of these too, and I just have to remember to take off my little tags so I don't sew through them, which I have done in the past. They come off easy enough, but it's still annoying. So I'm going to put these all in place. Make sure and double check against my pattern here, and then I'm going to glue down the corners that are going to get cut away, because these pieces are super small and I don't want them moving around when I'm sewing. So I'll just do like that. And when all of that is done, it's going to look like this. I'm going to sew, press, and trim all of this, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, so if I counted correctly, those are all of the stitch and flip corners I need to sew. And I can put aside my V and my O unit for now. I'm going to sew my M unit to this L piece. Then I have my Q, which I'm going to sew to the S like this. I'm also going to start this little flying geese unit here. So I have my U's and my T. So this is the fabric. So I guess this technically counts as another stitch and flip. So I'll stitch that, press it, cut it, and then stitch that. And I think that's all I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to finish these 3 units before I move on to anything else. I did it again. I even was thinking about it earlier and I totally forgot, and I sewed right through that. Luckily, it rips out super easy. It's just a little annoying. Then I will work on my thread piece. So here's the thread. And then the 2 E pieces go on either side of that. And then once those are sewn and pressed, then I can sew these on. The last little unit I want to work on is the needle unit. So we're going to start with the J and the I. That looks like an H, but that's an I. I'm going to sew those 2 together. And then on either side of those, we have the navy and the background. We're going to match it up to this side. And then trim this away if needed. Probably not. And then after those are sewn together, then G is going to come over and be right there. And then this is the last of the fiddly piecing, and we can put all the bigger pieces together. Okay, so all of my little units are done. Here's the thread. So cute. These are just squares. This is the little fabric piece. This is the needle. This is the throat plate, I think. This is the flywheel. This is the body. And this is the body. So I just need to put these pieces all together. So let's start with the bottom. So I have the V unit is going to go here. This is the TU unit. Then I'm going to scoot this a little over. And the flywheel, or the hand wheel, or whatever you want to call it, goes there. Then the needle. And here is my F, the thread, and the A. So from here, I just need to sew all of these units together in rows. So there will be 3 rows, and then I can finish them off with the border. Before I show you this month's finished quilt top, I want to give you a quick update on last month's mini quilt. Nothing has happened, basically, except I have finally decided that I am going to add labels to the jars, and the labels are going to be song titles. So for this one, I was thinking Baby Beluga, Puff the Magic Dragon, and then I'm coming short on these 3. I have several different ideas, but I haven't settled on anything. So if you have any suggestions for these 3, especially if they're sort of in the same silly vein of Baby Beluga and Puff the Magic Dragon, that would be so great. So help me out, leave some suggestions down in the comment section. Let's take a look at the back first. So I'm mainly pressed to the side except for when the seams got a little complicated, like when I was doing the rows and when I was pressing the thread, just because there are some really tiny seams here. So I pressed those open. You might notice I accidentally twisted a seam right here, and I am not going to do anything about it. I'm just going to let it go because I think it's not that huge of a deal. But I am curious if you have a twisted seam like this, or not even twisted, it just got pressed open on this side and not down here. Is this something that you would pick out and redo? Because if it's something really simple like this, it's not adding any extra bulk, I'm going to leave it in. It's not worth the time to unpick it and redo it, in my opinion. And here is the final result, and I actually really love it. I was worried there for a while as I was making it that the navy would be a little bit too ominous, a little doom and gloom, but I think the pops of pink and orange really brighten it up in a nice way. And I love a fabric with some gold in it. It is just one of my top tier things. If I see a fabric with gold, I'm like, yeah, I gotta have it. Speaking of the doom and gloom, I guess the skull fabric doesn't really help dispel that very much, does it? Now I have to decide if it's going to be a pillow or a wall hanging. Okay, I just realized I completely forgot to do this circle. I saw this fabric, I'm like, what's that for? And I'm, oh yeah, okay. So I forgot to do the circle. And I'm really not sure if it needs it or not. I don't know. That's a decision for another day. Thanks for spending time with me today, quilters. If you want to support this channel and help me buy supplies and materials for future videos, please visit my Buy Me a Coffee page linked in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss upcoming videos. And I'll see you again real soon. Bye!